All right.
You guys got your policy out yet?
Which one?
Hybrid meeting?
Not yet.
Well, I mean, it's one of those, how many people in the room, and that's how many opinions you have.
Well, that's not, it's, you still have to have a quorum. It's just that how many people have to, so the 20 people in the room, then the residents or property owners.
Yeah, and obviously the meeting facilitator needs to be in the room.
Right.
Doesn't have to be the chair necessarily.
No, that's the way I'm trying to word it.
Yeah, the issue, and I mentioned to him, is fine if you have staff, somebody can run the equipment, but like WPCA, there's no staff. And so Ed is gonna be running 2 meetings at once, because he's got the people here and the people
Same
online, plus he's trying to project all the stuff on the screen and run the tech, if it's hybrid. That's
Right. Well, the option is what I'm trying to do is not get rid of remote.
yeah, as long as it's good.
You have remote possible. The remote is always going to be a
That's right,
possibility.
that would, because Mary's suggestion was, has to be hybrid.
Well, I think where she was trying to go is not that it has to be hybrid, that if it's a meeting in person, it has to be
Yeah.
hybrid.
Okay,
So
yeah, that's fine with me, as long as we can.
Right, so my intention was to have remote meetings
Yeah.
or hybrid meetings.
Right.
Because I think that even if everything is done, said, we're back to normal, hybrid meetings are the good thing, because I think you actually get more resident participation.
We did, we got a lot of resident participation.
Because people could just-
Yeah, with PCC, we've got more people
Yeah.
when we were remote than we did in person.
The only hard spot was
Getting ready to go. Well, better wait for Marty to get back.
that Pete, everybody would have a heck of a problem to his normal mode of, okay, well, let me draw that in.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so my intention isn't to get rid of remote.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's very hard time to do that.
Because I would like to keep remote, even if you decide to go full hybrid. Let's just say, oh, hey, they're talking about a snowstorm.
Then
Let's just do it remote.
Sorry, it went down.
That way you still have the option of
Or
remote.
let's,
Not cancel the meeting.
and let people like Jerry Jones, who's now in Florida,
Yeah.
to
Participate.
participate.
Right.
They used to not be able to participate 3 months a year because you're in Florida.
Right, but if you have hybrid or like that, then you have the, hey, it's gonna snow, nobody's like, hey, let's not cancel a meeting, we can still have it, just do it
Or
remote.
Sharon would actually, her husband has to drive her to meet, Sharon can't drive.
Right,
And if you can do it from home.
Full screen, I am. I think she's back on the phone.
Okay. Think we're ready to go? See if
Is
we hear
Marty there
Marty.
on the phone?
Do we hear Marty?
They don't see him now.
Yep, I can hear you on the telephone.
You gotta spread out the people if you wanna see them all. You can drag it over. Oh, actually, you can't. It's that one. Never mind.
Oh,
Can Marty see now?
let's see.
Hey, Marty,
Marty,
Yes, Tony or Mike.
can you
I'm-
see now?
No, I've even sent it to my iPad from my PC, and it seems like the link is not activating for me. So I dialed in, and I do have the 30-page presentation that I can follow on, or you can seat somebody else, and I'll just listen, Tony.
That'll work. Well,
Yeah,
if you can just follow on, if you have that's what the presentation is gonna be.
yeah, I'm just gonna talk. This is just for your benefit later, so.
All right, then we'll call
Yeah,
the,
okay.
I will call the meeting to order at whatever time it is. Sometime what time it is.
5:38.
All right, what did we say, 5:38 p.m. Tony Capon calling a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 5:38. We do have a flag when you do a pledge of allegiance.
something we didn't have.
Something we haven't had for a long time. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
To the
States,
flag, United States of America,
which
to the
is
republic for which it stands,
under God,
one nation,
and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of, well, we'll do the roll call. Present either online or in person or online or Katie and Marty and Paul and I are present in person. This is a workshop. We don't need to appoint an alternate. We will make Paul a voting member, even though we're not voting on anything.
Sure.
Because it's a workshop, it's extremely informal. Oh, no, also the staff is here, president of council here. It says Fred, but I don't know if Fred's here or not. He may be doing.
I am here.
There he is. All right. It's informal, so anyone who wants to speak, please do so. And for those of you that are online, just go ahead and interrupt because we're not going to be looking for hands. So with that, there are no citizen petitions or no citizens, and it's a special meeting. So we will move right to the topic for tonight, which is the workshop, and it's the potential changes to zoning subdivision. And Julia will also, part of it will be talking a little bit about 2129 and the implications of 2129. So
Yep.
it is yours.
All right, so this has been a big job, and I didn't really want people to think I was just coming in and, racing in to change everything in your town. There was a reason that I took a look at your regs, and a reason that I feel strongly that these changes need to be made. So, I've been a planner for 15 years. I've worked in sector in economic development. I've worked as a regional planner with the COG and North Stonington, briefly in Salem. So I'm, overly familiar with rural towns, but my time at COG and sector obviously got me involved in all the towns in the region. So, so whenever I start at a new town, I like to get the big picture, what's going on here, what are the issues, and start there. And so I've spent a lot of time with Fred, obviously, and Mike, since he's been abducted into the zoning official role, and Nate and Tony, now, we've had some discussions about what are some of the issues that everybody thinks exist and how we can fix them. So I've written a lot of plans and a lot of regulations. I'm going to do this all the time. So this is something that I like to do, and I've had a lot of good results. We were able to turn around a lot in North Stonington and get development that was appropriate for that town. They've been on fire since we changed the regs. So my hope is that we'll have the same results here, but there are reasons why we do have to look at the regs and change regs every once in a while. I did notice when I first started here that you adopted a POCD in 2020, which triggers an examination of your regs. Regulations, zoning regulations are the implementing tool for your POCD. So I went to the POCD, looked through it, and I pulled out some things later in this presentation that I could find. Not a very strong vision in your POCDs. That didn't help me. I'm always looking for a vision because that's the most helpful thing I can find, and I didn't find one. But I could piece together what I think you wanted, or what you want for Ledyard from that document, fairly well. The other thing to remember is that document was put together, I assume, with public input, but in the public process, people got to weigh in. You might have done a survey at some point. So I think sometimes planning and zoning commissions and some public forget that there's a POCD that a lot of people had input with. So you may not agree with everything in there, but it's your job to create regs to implement that, whether or not you agree with it. That is the guiding plan. Your regulations are what you're supposed to write to implement. So there may be things in there that not everybody was 100% with, but it's there. The new statutes that were passed do trigger, some mandatory changes that we have to make to that first section that you have. Some definitions, things about cottage industries. There's, we opted to do the moratorium for the cannabis, and then of course the accessory apartments. parking issues, so there are things that I have to go through and find all of those that you had in your current regs that didn't, now would no longer comply with the statute, and we'll have to discuss those. I noticed a lot of contradicting regulations in here. So somewhere along the way, when you rewrote, there's incorrect, some things as simple as an incorrect section reference. But you have requirements in one section and then similar requirements in another section, but they're completely different. So I think when you were trying to switch to an approach of looking at the districts and coming up with requirements per district, you forgot that you had requirements per zone or per use somewhere else. And there was no out, like if the one didn't exempt you from the other anywhere in language. So someone, when a staff person picks it up, you're like, well, which one is it? Isn't it ADU by special permit or is it by right, like the table says? Is the setback, is it height 35 feet or is it 50 feet over here? So there was a lot of those that had to be cleaned up. The document itself is, it's just absolutely not user friendly, and the person that needs to be user friendly for the most is me and Mike. Nobody else, because we have to answer the questions every day. That's who it has to be friendly for. The second person on that list, and I said this in order, residents, because they're not experts at this. They don't do it every day, so they need to be able to get through that document easily. Developers, they're a little bit more adept at navigating through regs. They know that they probably should look in more than one place to make sure that there are other regs, there aren't any other regs. Realtors, same thing. And then you guys, you're last though. All of those other people use the document more than you. Obviously, yes, you need to be able to get through it too, but presumably you've helped create it, so you will have an easier time automatically navigating it. Then I went through and looked for, no-nos that we'll go over. The do's and don'ts of planning as guided by statute and case law. And I took a look at the regs because I know that there is interest in trying to facilitate development in, based on your plan and based on conversations with Fred, in your design districts, in your commercial zones. And you have a lot of challenges there because you don't have a lot of land. There aren't a lot of parcels that can be developed. There really aren't, and they're all boxed in by residential, which adds a whole other layer of complexity because you're not going to convert easily. So I was looking at those regs to think about that problem and how to overcome that, but I was looking for any other barrier to investment. And I call it investment, not economic development, because investment can be on a residential side. Do the regs prevent a person from doing anything to improve their house or from putting a shed on the property? You want them to do that because then you can tax it. So if you're trying to, increase your grand list, you want to encourage investment in any property, residential or commercial or industrial. Then I looked at all the places, and if you look at my other drafts, there's a lot of red boxes. This is one page of thou shalt never do those things. So that's, I call going out of your swim lane. There's certain things that the planning and zoning commissions are allowed to do and some that they're not. So you're overstepping your authority in some of these places. So that's where I started from, and that's what prompted me to just go ahead and do it. Because I do feel, if you have a planning professional who's trained in this, studied about it, let them do the writing, and then there are spots that you have to weigh in on because they're more important. Let me get through all the minutia and make sure you're legal, and then you tell me about the things that I can't make up for you. So that takes me to like your legislative function as a commission and your administrative function. They're two functions that you have. You have that planning function and the zoning function. So, but the legislative function is where you have your power. This is where you should be the most engaged. What you're doing now when you rewrite regs or write a POCD, because that should come first, is that you're thinking about what you want. What does a successful town look like? What would we like to see? What are our, big dreams? What are the market realities that you may never get to that dream, but what is it that you want to do? What are the problems, right? And then when you're writing regs, you get to create that framework to make those things happen. So you want good design, right? You have to write a framework of regs that guideline that applies to all the parcels in that zone and, or, you know, that use, no matter where it is, something like that, but you get to create that. Then you've done that part. Once you've created your regulations that are gonna get you this, you know, all these great things, then then you're out. Your part's done. Then it's staff that tells you this complies or it doesn't comply, and you're the second set of eyes to make that determination too. Special permit, obviously, and text amendment, map amendments, you're back to your more legislative function. Special permits sort of quasi. But for the most part, you should be able to rely on these regs, that these regs are gonna get you what you want. So you don't have to be making it up as you go, because you're not supposed to make it up as you go at all. Your second biggest superpower is, you know, you get to be intentional. You are the Planning and Zoning Commission, you're the members of this commission, and you now are sitting here and you can open up the regs and say, I want to change the use table. I don't like this. I believe that this use should go here and this one should go there. So you can think about what makes the most sense for that zone, thinking about all the properties in that zone. How big are they? Are they near a watershed? Are they near residential? Like, what makes sense in that zone and what doesn't make sense, more importantly, in that zone? And you get to say what makes sense is allowed, what doesn't make sense is prohibited, what could make sense, but it's a gas station, I'm not sure I really want it everywhere, and then you use your special permit tool. So, so staying within your legislative function or your administrative function is important. Being intentional is important. Creating clear, consistent, enforceable, predictable regulations is your top priority. You know, they have to be clear and they absolutely have to be consistent. That's statute, case law, whatever, you have to do that. It's not a may, it's a shall. And a good way to do that, one of the ways we've done it, we've in the office now, is going to the check sheets. Everybody gets the same check sheet. You must do this. You know, check the boxes off. If you checked all the boxes off, then we know that you've given us what we need. So it's not different for everybody. We had trouble with the, you know, trying to navigate section chapter 6, I think it is.
6, yeah.
Of, well, does that apply to residential or is that for commercial? I'm not sure. And so that we, you know, I see these plans in there that some have some information and others don't. So that you can't end up with that. Good definitions are key. Having good supplemental regs are also a must do. And then site development standards, and we'll talk about that. The other important thing is to allow flexibility. So market changes, or, you know, there used to be things didn't change at all. And if you notice lately over the last 2 decades, it's out of control. You know, paradigms are changing, you know, every day. It feels like pandemics, whatever. There's things that change. The market realities very quickly change. And a lot of towns hate rewriting their regs, obviously, because it's a huge job and nobody likes that. And so their regs stay the same, even though the market is completely different. All the trends are different. All the data is different. Your demographics are different. And there's no built-in flexibility in your regs. That makes it very hard. And then you get tempted to be like, well, you know, well, for this one, we could do it this way because we know that, no, we don't really have anything for mixed use, but that's the trend now. So we're just gonna fit it in our reg somewhere, or we're gonna fit it in, interpret a certain way and let it happen. You want to avoid that. It's better if your regulations themselves become flexible. And one of the ways that I've done that for you here is a very easy way is to generalize the land uses. Don't try to anticipate every single use because those trends are going to change. Like, did we ever think we were going to get a bark and brew? No. So, you know, you have to figure out like what would have been, what's a good general category to come up with, define it well, think about what uses might fall under that. And if a few of those scare you, that's fine, call them out and write a supplemental reg for it. So there's nothing wrong with that, but just make sure you have the general category there. And then the second other way to create that flexibility, obviously allowing things like mixed use and consolidated developments and things like that. And only worrying about your building envelope. You know, you just get to pick what the setbacks are, then go away, back off. Anything else that happens there is up to that person. It's their property. You can't regulate pretty. You can't regulate behavior. You know, you make that decision and let them have the flexibility to put the buildings where they want. Don't try to micromanage that.
I mean, you can't regulate ugly.
No, unfortunately, there's a few other things you can't regulate.
So what is what forced you to do this? What's the forcing function that says, planner, it's time to look at the regulations and,
Your POCD was adopted.
okay, so this is an education for me. So what forced the P O C D?
Statute. Every 10 years, you
Every
have to
10 years, okay.
to create one, just like this says.
Yep.
You gotta do it every 5.
Hey, is the presentation online showing where you're at currently in the discussion?
You can scooch down a hair.
If you could squeeze down the agenda, it would be a little bigger too.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, knock down the agenda if you want. If you can.
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how.
Take your,
Yeah, sometimes if you hover over that bar between them.
Yeah, and drag.
There you go. Yep, perfect.
you can shrink down that face too, but the gist of it's on the side anyway.
Thanks.
Top left.
It's on the other one.
Oh, is that the other one?
Your requirements also should be reasonable. You know, don't go crazy. There's somebody who shall remain nameless that was a little picky in some of the regs. You know, it's not enforceable. It's not, remember, your goal is to facilitate investment or facilitate the achieving of some goal that you have in your POCD. So the more minutia you put in, the less likely that's going to occur. And people will
When we
be
did the
scared away.
2018 regs, Kevin was there, and we went in and we tried to remove minutia, make it more general, write regs that were enforceable. We left all the minutia in, we left it too specific, and then when I moved in to try and help with the zoning enforcement, I found out they were unenforceable. So the three things we tried to do in 2018, we kind of missed the target. But we tried.
And connections are missing.
Well,
Like I said,
the problem is, yeah, we,
connections between the
you know, trying to,
We did it a chapter at a time.
we did it a chapter at a time, and sometimes the
Sometimes
link
we go
back
back
to where it should have gone just didn't happen.
Exactly. So a planner naturally, we don't think that way, ever. We think out here. This is where we live all the time. So we're always got our eye on where does this connect with this and this and this. You never take it down to that level.
Yeah.
That's why you have 17,000 things up in front of you on the board, because you always have to be looking. The other thing, you know, all the regulations in the world are not going to make this town look like some other town that you liked, that you saw. It can't happen. Every town is unique for so many different reasons. You know, demographic, geographical, geological. Like, if you've ever gone through a story of place exercise, it's fascinating because it just really explains how certain things influence how a town develops and the pattern of development and why certain people are here and are not here. It's pretty interesting, or why there's farming here and not in another place. So
We proved that with the Legislative Senate district regs, the architectural requirements. That whole time we had those in the forest, nothing happened.
and that is a tool that you can have. That's the only way you get to try to regulate free, is if you have to have a village district with adopted design guidelines that are mandatory. They can't be voluntary. They have to be
We had a
mandatory.
mandatory, but our error was we were trying to create a village with the village district regs instead of maintain it with the village district regs.
Right.
And that was the vision of the planner at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to, that's got to be gradual. And I'll actually jump to an example of, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the Gales Ferry district, and that it's filled with houses. It's like built out almost entirely residential. Okay, now what? And so I was talking to Mike, and I think you, all right, well, what could we do? And so I thought, well, what if we added a category of home occupation that's specifically targeted for, it's accessory to a house, a legally existing house, that happens to be in a non-residential zone already. Well, could that person, since it is a commercial zone, have a bigger home occupation? Could it be in a separate building with a separate access to it, so that resident could try out the business and see if it's a good spot? If it is, well, that's good. Tear down the house, we'll make this bigger. Or I'll create a mixed use development. The benefit there is, if it's just a home occupation, they don't lose their residential status, because they may not want it, because once you switch, once you become conforming to the use of the zone, you can't go back. So it's a gentle way of trying out something to see if it works. And if it doesn't, they go back to being a house. If it works, you've got a new business. And that's a gentle transition versus trying to impose, you know, I don't know, make everybody non-conforming, and anytime they want to do something, they have to abide by some standard. It just doesn't work for that property. It's already built out. So, so those are my, you know, the most, the do's, and the, no more on it. I went through and I took out anywhere that I saw at the discretion of the commission. All gone. I mean,
That's our job.
okay, so they can't do that.
You know what it is.
It's, yeah, I'm sure it was there because you had a lot of special permits before where you have a little bit of discretion. You don't have full discretion though. But the point is, you're supposed to have regulations that have clear, concise, regulations and requirements spelled out that somebody can pick it up and say, do I comply or not? Oh, you do. Then there's no discretion. So you get a little bit of discretion with the special permit when you're trying to make sure that they are, what they provided you or what they're saying about traffic and whatnot meets the intent of those special permit criteria. So all of the other ones and all of those are administrative, but you can say, well, we have buffering requirements and this use is, you know, a potential nuisance. So since we do allow buffering, you have to give us more buffering, you know, or we can control when your events are, you know, so you have a little bit of leeway there, but you do have some discretion, but you have that written in places that you don't have that discretion. And I went through and did the math on a lot of regulations. So I'll get to the multifamily one, the animal husbandry one. So I went through and see the requirements that you have. Do they make sense, or are they completely not doable, or is there something radically wrong with the math? You can go down. Yeah. So stay in your lane. So you get your authority from statute. The statute very specifically says what you can regulate and what you can't. So scroll down a little bit more. So the items on that list, this is straight from statute. This is what you get to do. And this is it. You get to say where the uses can occur, what to call that zone, what uses are allowed in that zone, what setbacks are allowed, how much open space you might want. And, you know, you could do things like 10% for open space for a minute, do things like that. That's allowed. Lot coverage, pervious surface coverage, height, you know, all of those very straightforward. They're not discretionary, they're not subjective. You get to pick what they are. And then you're out, right? You pick what they are. And if you're in a particular zone, it has to be, those requirements has to be uniform for every single parcel in that zone. Period. That's law now. You can have different standards for that use in another zone, but if you're within your zone, everything has to be the same. That's so that when somebody buys a property, they know exactly what's going to happen over here and what's going to happen over here. There's not going to be a different standard, which is why I have a really hard time with your regulation about things not being allowed in front of the main building. When all the buildings are in different places all along the street, that to me flies in the face of this, but which you'll notice in here, there's nothing about aesthetics. There's nothing about character, because that's gone now. You do have the public health and safety, which are your only wishy-washy ones here. Convenience and property values, but those come in on the special permit, not for like site plan. We do put it in there as a general guideline, you know, we would really hope that you don't build something that's gonna pollute, you know, the air or the water. But those type of things that have to be proven usually happen in a special permit. So the staying in your lane, making sure that you don't go out of your swim lane. I found an example that I thought was pretty good. And it came from your, I think it was the CIP zone. And it talks about, you know, you have lists of regulations for that zone. And it's, you know, there are other driveway regulations somewhere else, but we're talking about this zone. And it says, I'll read it, the vehicle entrances shall be a minimum of 30 feet wide, which also cracked me up because if it's an interior lot in a CIP zone, the minimum frontage is 20 feet. So that won't work. But anyway, there should be a minimum of 30 feet wide unless wider entrances are approved by the Commission for Safety. What's wrong with that?
Well, if it's safety required, it ought to be specified. And you can't modify it on a site plan review anyway.
Right, so if this is not a special permit, that, you can't do that. You're also, so if it's not a special permit, it's site plan, it's administrative, and there's only one board that can waive the requirement for 30 feet, and that's the zoning board of appeals, not you. The entrances shall be clearly defined, the total number of entrances that can be safely accommodated. Who gets to determine safely? No one. I mean, that you'd have to have something, I don't even know how to figure that one out. Sightline is where you get to say something about sightline. You get to say if the road or the access is at a 90-degree angle or something, you can do that. Distance between driveways, but they all have to be, whatever your idea of safety, like whatever you were worried about, you have to spell out
That's just
somewhere.
good.
So, I mean, it doesn't have to, it has to be somewhere. So the total number of entrances that can be safely accommodated along the road will be a consideration for approval
Okay.
or disapproval of the site plan. When possible, each development shall be limited to one access point per property. However, separate accesses may be approved. Again, you're saying one thing, you're saying the commission is allowed to waive that, you're not. And then it can be approved for employee vehicles and truck traffic where appropriate. Who gets to decide that? That's too subjective. Where significant truck traffic is anticipated, the commission may require the construction of a separate turning lane at site entrance. No off-site improvements, period. But so you get that whole thing is you're looking at a project and without any standards written down, because at this point you don't have any. You're saying, well, we think that's not safe and you should have 2 entrances and they should look like this. And you don't have that kind of power. You have to spell that out somewhere.
I remember Oxford versus Sturd Garden Park, and it was an affordable housing presentation. And they went through court for well over a year. And a lot of it was the commission using words like we have on, well, we don't think that fire truck can turn that corner. And Sturd Garden Park bringing in an expert that builds fire trucks and a guy who designs roads and demonstrating with models that, no, it works fine.
Right. But you should have
So much
turning
subjective.
radiuses put in your, if you're worried about that, whatever you're worried about, get a standard in. After asking an expert, I don't
So
know what the
they
proper
spent-
turning radius
They
is.
probably
either.
spent $1 million getting that approved. And when all was said and done, the developer got almost everything he asked for at the beginning. The only thing they made him do was add a second entrance for safety, and then the court agreed with that. The first one was blocked, the second one was required.
And what do you think he told anybody who asked me, what was the process like in Leisure to get my plan approved? I mean, there would be some expletives, I think, that come along with that. Another good example I found was, or let me tell you how I would have rewritten that. I did rewrite it and I ended up taking it out anyway. Vehicle entrances shall be a minimum of 30 feet wide for developments that anticipate greater than however many trucks, you'd have to decide that. Number of daily vehicle trips for large commercial industrial vehicles, the width of the entrance shall be a minimum of 50 feet. So specific numbers, like what do you think is the safest thing? I think 50. And the entrances shall be clearly defined. A maximum of 3 vehicle entrances are permitted where one of the 3 is utilized for employee or non-commercial vehicle access only. So a maximum, giving you a range, you can still pick 1. Or if it's a special permit, now you can pick 3 or 1, depending on whatever you think. I gave you the range built in. So you eliminate any of the discretion. The other good example I found was your outdoor illumination. This one really cracked me up. It says outdoor illumination, including area lighting and flood lighting, shall be designed for safety, convenience, and security while minimizing sky glow, safeguarding against discomfort glare. What is that? And avoiding trespass lighting an adverse effect from illumination. There's so many things like, and then I went looking for the standards for lighting, and there aren't any. You don't
Right.
say, you know, foot candles. I can see their faces.
Okay,
I can tell you there's some new houses that have been built that have floodlights that shine into my bedroom at night. And there's no way for them to know that those lights aren't appropriate because we don't have any lighting regs.
And I was gonna talk to you guys about, some towns don't give lighting standards for residential parcels, but I think they should, given, I don't know, I've seen, there are issues. So remind me to get some into the, you know,
And I
lighting
would've
standards for
thought, I would've
residential.
thought she'd be okay, because her house is pretty much up on the hill. So
so
in fact,
Are we
Yeah,
further
that's-
along in the presentation?
And I'm just, this isn't, you don't have it up here. I don't have it, a slide for it. I was just giving some examples. So the things that were wrong with that is that for statute says you can regulate location, size, height, orientation, and design.
That's it.
That's what you get to, but put them in there.
Yeah.
So you get to do it.
Yeah.
So decide what, 20 feet pole, downcast, 3-foot candles at the property line, or whatever it is. But, and that's where you get to have a say. So it's not just staff telling you what to do. I'm telling you what the parameters have to be. You have to stay within. Now you tell me, based on your POCD or whatever, what makes sense to you? And we'll do that with the uses, and we're gonna go through that exercise with the dimensional regulations and what else, the supplemental regs probably a little bit.
but they have to be objective. Can't
Yes,
be subjective, and all of it is subjective.
So
Yeah.
is there any planner's guidebook out there that says, hey, if you're gonna put this in, it should be 50 feet? I mean, how'd you come up with 50?
yeah, there's white
I've
papers that come
got,
out and stuff.
APA published the
Yeah.
21st century urban design guidelines. And the problem is, we're not quite urban. It does go rural through suburban to urban. And a lot of it is pretty specific. And you know, if we get stuck, I mean, I pulled a couple out and said, hey, this says this.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite apply. Luckily, we have Juliet who can go, but if we change it this way, it does.
Yeah, and there's standards for parking, you know, like parking space sizes and
Yep.
lanes and driveway radiuses and curb returns and I don't know, the signs, signs are hell. They're the worst to try to.
Yeah,
I
a lot
avoid them.
of it was, we kind of knew what we wanted. but
You can go
when we
down
did this
and-
parking lot, we knew we didn't want it real bright. And the first plan that came in had each arc of the light overlap the next pole. We said, well, why can't we just go arc to arc? It may be a little dimmer where the two arcs meet, but this isn't a library, it's a parking lot.
Right, and if that were a special permit and you were concerned about the location of that property line or property, you know, I don't know, might be near a sketchy
Well, we had-
neighborhood,
we had
you
no
could say, I want
standards.
more lights.
Right.
Yeah,
We just kind of thought that would be nice.
you want more lights, but you still have to abide by those
Yeah.
parameters, so you can mess around with it a little bit as long as you don't go over the foot candle.
When Ocean State Job Lock took out their dull lights and put in the LED lights, we asked for a lighting survey and tell us what the light's gonna be across the parking lot. I hired a guy, an engineer that does that. They gave us the lighting printout. And we looked at it and said, well, that's nice, thank you.
Right, so what would you do with that? You have nothing, you
We-
can't do anything with that, because you
Yeah,
don't have
what
anything to
you told me.
measure it
What
against.
would you stand?
And so
One
you,
lumen over here versus 300 over there.
and you would have said, oh, we think that's too bright, and they
No,
would have
we
said,
we said,
we'll
thank
see
you
you
very
in
much.
court, you know, I mean, because you can't do that.
Yeah, well,
So,
we did, but, you know.
so the,
So can I ask another question? So, remember, I'm new at this, at the planning and zoning. So, can I regulate green? Like, I want LED lights on all new commercial parking lots.
You can regulate energy efficiency, yes.
Mhm. Yeah, that is actually in that list. And
But I think more to what's point is, you gotta have those standards
Yeah,
in there,
to be able to say what you're looking for. We don't, current regulations don't say that.
right,
now what's that? Now let me put my sector hat on, right? So you go from North Stonington to Ledyard.
Mhm.
How did the zoning change
Well, now it's gonna look
More like. North
much
End.
more similar, but
Remember,
yeah, I mean,
one
the
of
goal,
one of
what is the sector
says-
goal? That was one I put in there, that zoning should be, whatever can be standardized should be standardized.
Right.
Definitions, the procedure, obviously is the same, it's guided by statute, and some of the best practices. And right now in the region, all the we all know each other well,
Mhm.
and we see from each other daily. So you find it when you see your reg come back around, like, oh, hey, I wrote that one.
Well,
So
back
if they are
during your
getting
days
there.
at COG, we pushed on, well, back when we had a regional planning commission that actually, before we got defunded. We used to review,
Give me great ideas.
we used to review the changes intermunicipality impact, and I
Right.
used to walk away with, boy, that's a good idea, we ought to do that.
Right, and that was a good, that was a good exercise.
forum.
Yeah.
And at that level, at the planners at COG, getting regionalized and having somebody go write me a good reg for affordable housing or cannabis or short-term rentals. All the planning folks would say, yeah, we need that. All the CEO folks would go, they're gonna tell me how to do that in my town.
Right, but so we meet as the planners meet regionally
Yeah.
and we do trade regs. You know, we'll say, does anybody have a good one on this? You know, or I call them, who's got what, and I like that. And you have to tailor a little bit to your town and remember, you're always trying to think, what lots are these going to apply to? So sometimes it don't make any sense because all of those lots are half acre, but it was written for a town where all of the lots are 2 acres. So I mean, you wouldn't see certain parts of that, so. Then the other thing you tie it back to is the statute. Why are we zoning? What is the purpose of zoning? And they tell you for you, this is what the purpose is, and this is the only purpose of zoning. So this is what you get to regulate, and this is why you get to regulate it. And the one biggest change that came out this time was taking away what I call the character crutch, where every town relies on, oh, we want to preserve the rural character. You know, or preserve something, and Fred pointed this out the other day, like, sometimes you look at the area that you really want to preserve that character. I don't, I want to get rid of that character entirely. So to deny an application on that, well, now you can't do that, but what it's gonna force towns to do, thank God, I mean, we've been waiting. What is it that you want to preserve? Give me a fighting chance to get it into a regulation for you then, because if I don't know what it is that you like, I know what I like and don't like, but I don't even live here, you know, what do you like and don't like, and what do you want to preserve? So a lot of towns obviously, like to protect stone walls or vistas, or you can detail architectural characteristics. That's allowed, I mean, you can, but you have to be very specific, and so that you can say, well, no, that's not in keeping with the character of that neighborhood, but it has to be something obvious, like the stucco house in the middle of, antique wooden stick
Well,
built gables, something. I
That's
don't know.
our problem was when we tried to do that here with our design district, village district regs. We didn't have anything on the ground that we wanted to keep.
Right, you were trying to develop
establish
something.
it, we're trying to develop it.
Yeah, the problem was is we established regulations that nothing in the
Nothing
legislature
met.
met.
Exactly. And the reason they took out the character is more having to do with affordable housing, because a lot of, like multifamily and fourplex, or duplexes in your case, are denied because somehow they don't fit into some character that's not defined. So
But
that
if-
was the major
if
gist
you
of
took
that.
your whole commission and you sent them all to 8 different rooms, and you told me at 15 minutes, write down what the character of Ledyard is,
We're gonna do that.
you'd get 8 different answers.
I've done that exercise,
And
and
that's one
it's
thing
very
that we do.
interesting, yeah. I do that for
Right, we need to address
PFC.
it. And the other thing with character is that towns were wanting to maintain the character of certain neighborhoods, but not the character of other neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So it was the character was discriminatory. It didn't mean let's maintain the character of every neighborhood. It meant only, it was used very selectively.
Well, as we started out, can't regulate pretty or ugly.
Right,
Right.
all right, so.
When we see it, but
I'll move along faster because we're gonna be running late. So those are these are your tools that you have, what you want and where do you want it, your building envelope, your density. You can very clearly define things so that nobody's confused. You don't have to have discrepancies on the planning and zoning commission during deliberations, things like that. You can protect the natural and historic character resources, rather, if you identify them. But that one is a little more general still in the statute. So as long as you are able to articulate it, that'd be fine. You can use special permit. One tool of special permit is if you're not totally against a particular use, but you would really prefer that it landed in the CIP zone versus your, I don't know, industrial zone or the Ledger Design Center there, you would make it permitted by right in the zone that you want it to be in, and special permit in the zone you don't want it to be in. Any developer is always going to default to, if they can find a parcel in the zone that it's by right, they're going to go there. So it's just a tool to use that with. And I do like special permits for nuisance uses. If you don't have dynamite supplemental regs to deal with the potential nuisance, and sometimes you can't anticipate all of the nuisance. So especially you have a big watershed. That's one reason why you would use special permit for industrial uses or manufacturing, things like that. Auto repair. You can create a special district with special regs, and then you have enforcement. You have wetlands and other tools that you can bring in to safeguard the things that you want to preserve. Next slide. So the thing, now we're going back to before I go into the details here. Always have in the back of your mind when you're writing regs, who are you writing these for? Who are you planning for? What was your vision? What was your goal? What would it success look like? What would be great to have? What's working? What's not working? Always have that in your brain so that you can tell me and I can get it in here. So I looked in your PLCD, and to me, it seems like you definitely value your open space. You're trying to create better connections with your open space, a better like open space plan, so you don't get crappy, set aside open space. You want it to make sense and connect to something else. Walkability is big. You're doing a multi-use path, but you also want the possibility of sidewalks and internal connections within new developments. I love one of the quotes in your plan. It says perceived open space can be transformed into preserved open space through the creation of a cohesive vision that helps the community grow by choice and not by chance. And so whenever I say you've got to be intentional, be active, not reactive. I love that. So you should be working from this shared vision and shared goals. So I definitely, but you didn't have a lot of, juicy, like change the regs to do this, but, provide a reasonable level of flexibilities. So there are some regs in there that you at least ask for contiguous open space. We can beef that up a little bit more. I did add, you did suggest in your PSD require that all lots contain a minimum buildable square. We did that in North Stonington. It's a little mean, but it's definitely controls development. If you want to slow down your residential development in this town, do a buildable square, make it a square or a rectangle with no wiggle room on wetlands. You'll never find, you will not get those squiggly down on the lot. But I did add minimum buildable area, like what counts towards that minimum buildable area, which is stricter than what you have now. Because you had a lot of language about, protecting the watershed and water resources, and you don't do that right now. On the housing side.
I have a question. So we don't currently require building lots that we approve to show a buildable square?
No, the only thing you ask for is that they don't have, that 75% of it has to be contiguous, non-wetland. That's it.
We thought that we were doing, a buildable area. Well, really what we said was draw the lot and now draw the setbacks in. You can't build in the setback, but inside that setback could be wetlands, streams, lakes, upland review area, severe slope, CL&P, wiring and easements. So we never
You
never took
defined
it
it,
further.
you defined it sort of in your subdivision reg, but didn't hold anybody to it. It doesn't appear in a regulation anywhere. except for that 75% rule.
Yeah.
So I definitely added that, because I feel strongly about that, because that's why they've been taking advantage of you on the cluster subdivision regs and things, because they aren't subtracting out the access right of way or the utility easement area. Those are they are non-buildable areas. You cannot build in them. So if the idea of a buildable area is to have sufficient land to get a house, a well and a septic system and have enough light and air, you're allowed to regulate that or safeguard your towns against that. If you want good design, you've got to be stricter on that, because that'll force the developer to be a little bit more creative or maybe not get that other lot.
Right, yeah.
Because remember, housing is a tax negative. It's not a tax positive. Being a bedroom community is not good for your bottom line. Well, it isn't. It requires road maintenance and services and staff.
It's good if you don't mind paying the taxes. paying the bill. Yeah,
Yeah,
And it's
Yeah,
good, and then
that's
it
fine.
brings people into town and they're gonna spend, and that's gonna give you, but that itself is not.
right. It's still, I mean, when you do the cost for
Right, yeah.
cost for community services.
Absolutely, yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
benefit.
a good example would be the 4-bedroom colonials that we have in town, where we might have, let's say, a $9,000 or $10,000 tax bill. And if you saw Superintendent Hartling's presentation last night about our cost per pupil, we lose big on every one of those houses that's built, because I think he said we were approaching what, $20,000 cost per pupil. So
Wow.
it's gone up dramatically, and yet we are one of the single lowest communities. Actually, we're the lowest community in southeastern Connecticut on a cost per pupil basis. Ranked number 160 out of 169 municipalities in the state of Connecticut. So you're right, it's a losing proposition on those bigger homes. The apartment housing where there might be 2 bedrooms is a different story.
Yeah,
There's only one child in the home,
yeah, there might be 2.
and it, they're paying $9,000 in property taxes, but it's
Will be.
costing $15,000 to $20,000 per student
Right.
just to go to school, never mind
Fire,
fire,
road,
police,
yeah.
road, general
So,
government costs.
right. So if you want to be a bedroom town, house all the EB guys in an apartment building, because then you get some tax money.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's vertical, it's,
Mhm.
more units more bathrooms and kitchens, they cost a lot in your building fees. There's other ways to do
Yeah,
housing.
that's kind of what I was getting at. I didn't say it as well as I wanted
Yeah.
to, but
A bedroom
Yeah,
community
yeah.
of mixed,
a mix,
Variety.
not a bedroom community, all single family, $450,000 houses. That's not,
and
that doesn't help us.
you got to that in your P O C D. You said that. You said viable communities are diverse in terms of age, income, family status, and should contain a reasonable mix of housing types. All of your goals in the housing section of your plan push you to middle housing, mixed, accessory dwelling units, detached, and a easier way to allow duplexes.
Marty wrote that section.
Okay, good. If you might.
He did. That was new with this P O C D, that we looked hard at what Seiksha was saying.
Yeah,
And
and we're required to
we
now.
put it
It's
in
a-
the
it's a shall
POCD,
now.
we just didn't get it into our regs because they're offset by.
So we're going, I put some things in there. I did change duplexes to be by right. They should be looked at the same way you look at a single family house, because it's the same check sheet. So it's almost impossible to figure out how to, review a duplex via special permit. I was looking at like, what am I supposed to do here? What are they supposed to give you that would be different than if it was just a regular house? Nothing. So, and allowing accessory dwelling units, you want infill, you don't want to continue to sprawl. So if there's a way to get some more units in, and especially get multifamily units in areas that you want it to, you get to decide where. But then after you decide where, let it happen. So make it easy to happen. And I definitely made some changes to your multifamily. So then to the other goal that I saw was revise land use regulations to be pro-business without sacrificing commitment to environmentally sound development. But then we allow so many car repairs and auto body, you had so many different classifications that as if it was catered to developments, and that's all you're ending up with here, because there's no other, that's the easiest one to do, because it's everywhere. So, you mentioned supporting home-based businesses, which is a fantastic idea. I've given you 3 categories of that, and we can add however, you can add whatever supplemental reg you want. You can do whatever you want, but we shall not be able to see you at all. Like, whatever, you have to put solid arborvitae around your park. You can come up with whatever you need to feel like you're safeguarding property values or whatnot. They talked about lighting standards, so I gave you those. This is from your P O C D. It said create supplemental regs for all uses requiring a special use permit. I gave you those. The expanding the design district by rezoning residential, that's gonna be really difficult. You've got established subdivisions butting up against there. There might be a few parcels, sure, but you're better off with that home occupation idea, maybe. I gave you the minimum buildable area to safeguard, to speak to the environmentalist side of that. And then it says, you want to manage the growth of public services and maintenance costs. So you got to tighten up your reins on your subdivision regs. You give away the farm on that. And that's not helping you on your maintenance costs and public service and things like that, because they're getting away with murder and by using that shared driveway deal. The farming, I did put in radically change the ag regs. So obviously they're gonna look a lot like North Stonington's as far as the accessory uses go. This one is important. I don't want to go the route. I would advise that you not go the route of the floating zone, the agricultural zone. And I never think that's a good idea. Figure out what it is about ag that you're afraid of and address that. If you don't want event barns, say so, and we won't put them in. If you think event barns are okay, if the parcel is 100 acres, fine, say so, we'll put that in. You get to decide those, but then let it be wherever. And where anybody can meet that, let them do it, because that's one of your prime ways you're gonna get some commercial growth, with in an area that is not zoned commercially, because you don't have any, so you want to allow that somehow.
Over the years, we've avoided agricultural zone. And then we've talked about it every time we modify the regs, we talk about, should we have an agricultural zone? And we never really had a consensus from the agricultural community. And for those of us that weren't part of that community, we didn't see what's the plus for doing that. What do we gain?
There's a huge plus, and the biggest plus for doing that is farmers are getting old, period. They're gonna go away and farmland is flat.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna end up with another 4-bedroom colonial subdivision is what's gonna happen. And so you want to make sure you save your farms. Your farms also provide that perceived open space that everybody loves. That open space that you don't have to pay for. Everybody wants that. They don't ever want the lot next to them to develop. That's their open space. No, it's not their open space, and it will be developed if you don't let that farmer figure out something to do, something else to do to keep his business alive, or
Oh,
something
yeah,
his kids
but-
might be interested in doing.
But I don't know that we would need to have an agricultural zone.
No,
per se.
no, I don't think.
I
we
would
do.
never in favor of an agricultural
Yeah.
zone. I thought agriculture,
I mean, we basically
agriculture only
say,
happens where it happens.
Yeah.
Where the laws will
if
fit.
anything over 3 acres,
I think you gotta bump that to 5. but,
yeah, probably. I mean, even Lebanon, I think that's fine.
Most towns did 5, yeah, especially for it didn't quite work with your animal husbandry things. And you're an ag town, and I mean, the process to get 7 chickens in this town. I mean, I was just like, I thought it was a joke when I first started. I'm like, that can't be right. That's gotta be a typo. What do you mean it's a special permit?
It never, we used to not even allow it. Every chicken was a special permit.
I mean, that's crazy.
That was, Kevin and I changed it to say, come on.
Let's do, so let's have some chickens.
Yeah, I mean, the roosters, yeah.
No, but it was literally home husbandry. If you had one chicken, we need to have a special permit.
$560 to get one
One
chicken
chicken.
that might die the next day from the hot.
I grew up in Chicago, so somebody tells me you can't have roosters. They look the same to me.
Yeah, right. Don't sound the same. So I did make some radical changes there, classified big, small, animals and, you know, again, what are you worried about? You're worried about smell, containing the animals, you know, we call them the wayward chickens. That was the biggest issue in zoning that I've dealt with over the last 10 years. They get out, you know, and the cows that
I
get
love
out.
watching chickens sitting there alongside the road.
Always kill the
Yeah,
cows.
we've gone through a process to come up with a set of proposed agricultural regulations that started with North Stonington's regs that we stole from somebody, Juliet.
Right. And those regs work. They've had no issues
Is
for
that,
10
we're pretty
years with
close
those
to
regs.
those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin, you mean the chickens down by the park, Mitch?
Oh, I love that.
No, I so do I.
Every time I drive by there.
I know.
God, awesome.
We're not
I
messing
know,
with
home insurance regulates poultry differently than larger livestock too. I don't know if, you know, you could be more flexible on the smaller livestock that doesn't cause car accidents versus you know, cow or something, goat.
I mean, again, you should be looking at, again, what is the lot? You know, what's on the lot? So we don't, you want to make sure you have adequate space for that animal based on best practices that somebody else already determined. So you don't even put any of those in
Yeah.
because it's not your job. The Farm Bureau is gonna tell you whether or not that's best practices and get your regulations from there, which is where I got North Stonington from, was there. So I took it from the source, the experts, modified it for North Stonington. Now I've taken it and modified it for your town. You can then say to me, again, I don't want event barns, or I don't like pick your own, or whatever it is, and we can tweak it farther. Or I think that this should be 10 zone, 10 acres and the perimeter buffer again. That's where you get to play with it now. And once we put it in there, make the process easy, because you do want to facilitate agricultural uses in your ag town, I would hope.
Well,
I mean,
we-
and that's what I got from your POCD, definitely. So.
We had reached no buffer because the agricultural community wanted a 200-foot buffer on the residential side, and the residential community wanted a 200-foot buffer on the agricultural side. So we picked no buffer.
Right.
That's which book you read, who gets the buffer.
Right, and that, you know, you can't mess with existing farms. That doesn't end well, I promise. It just doesn't end well.
And that's what created the habit.
Right. But, you know, you can regulate subdivisions, new housing developments that land next to a farm, put the buffer on their side, not farm side. But, or they're, you know, they're moving it next to a farm. I mean, I moved in next to a farm and it smells like 8 days a year and they spread that for it. But, you know, it is what it is. I moved in knowing.
Takes a year.
I've been next to a farm for 40 years.
So,
I'm just used to it.
but
Exactly.
you want to preserve your farms because they will turn into subdivisions in the blink of an eye. All right, so then now just you can scroll down. So I went through, you know, every section to try to summarize what I changed. So the biggest thing in you know, section 1, I fixed the language to meet the new statutes that 8-1 has to change, and that was the biggest thing I did there. Section 2, your definitions. Key in definitions is have them. That's where court cases are won and lost. So it always goes back to definitions. If your definitions are bad or they don't exist, you're gonna have a harder time. So any use you have in here, define it. And then take all of the regulations out of that definition and put them in the supplemental. So you had a lot of regulations still written in your definitions. They have to get out, go into the definition page, or in the supplemental regulation side. So you'll see a lot of, you know, new definitions in there, and just making sure that even in the 8 months here, the things that I've gotten questions about, I've made sure there now is a definition about it. You had some discrepancies again in your lot lines and building lines and setback line. There was like 3 different ways you're describing it. Oh my God, we're picking one, and that's what we're going with. It's too hard to go back and forth. Is that a lot or is that a parcel? Is there a difference? Does it matter? Does, but we see lot and parcel over here, but only lot. Pick one, go with it. Same with like access way, driveway. You use them both interchangeably, but they're defined totally different. You know, that was, you know, another example, but so section 3, so that's different. So you used to have just your bulk table, I think it was in 3 before.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's, I totally changed the format, so I took the bulk table out of there, because it's gonna go in a different section. Because the other big change here to make this document user-friendly is there are people that, the residents are come in and they don't care about your commercial regs. They don't use them, so they're gonna go they just wanna go to the residential section. So everything having to do with residential is in the residential section, including the use table, dimensional requirements, purpose, any special zones, that's there. So that there's no confusion that when we're in section 9, we're not talking about your house. You know, these are only, those are the site development standards. Those only apply to things that aren't approved administratively. This is also why it's important that duplex not cross the line. Now, do they follow the check sheet for a house, or do they follow your site, your check sheet for a site plan? Those are two entirely different things. I don't need all of this information, but you can't waive it. So now what? So if that's you can't do that. It just has to be in a different category. Otherwise, you're going to be writing some pretty intense supplemental regulations for a duplex, and you're still going to have to waive requirements. I don't know how to do that. Trust me that it's okay that staff reviews a duplex. You can weigh in on the check sheet if there's something you want. And we can also put in a supplemental reg, because the only thing I heard out loud, somebody say that the parking, they don't like the way the parking looks on a duplex, because it's too much parking, it changes the look of the neighborhood.
Were you
Like that,
here
you
for the
can't-
last one we approved?
Yeah, but you can't deny it,
No.
now you can't deny it based on that.
No.
Period.
Yeah, but
So-
that 4-bedroom house is gonna have that many cars.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And or the 4-bedroom house with an accessory apartment. I mean, people have
Well,
cars.
Well, it is like when both kids were home and going to school and in different activities, we had 4 cars for a four-member family.
Right,
Because there is no real public transportation from any of our residential subdivisions. So unless we wanted to play mom and dad taxi,
right. So, and your duplex is probably not gonna have 4 bedrooms in one side.
no.
You know,
It's
you're gonna
probably
be 2
4
and 2,
total,
you're gonna have 4
yeah.
total. So, but you could say if for duplexes, the parking has to be on the side and it has to be buffered. You're allowed to do that. You could do that, and we could put those in. I might have actually. So, and then I had your prohibited uses there and your moratorium language in section 3. So section 4, now before I get to the all things residential and all things commercial, there are some general dimensional requirements that cross, all districts. And I added a key exception for one. So since I've been here and I've been talking to Mike, there's been a lot of rezoning that's occurred. There are a lot of subdivisions that were created before subdivision. I mean, they were created by a subdivision, but not approved, via the subdivision regs, because it was before the time. And in the 60s, a lot of those houses were built up towards the road. You then further went and changed how you measured setbacks. Before you went from the center line, and now you're coming from the property line. That is a huge impact. So you have a ton of houses that do not meet the front yard setback period, and then they can't. Right, but there's a lot of them. This is a big number. And so you make them spend the $560 and wait 2 months to go get a variance that your ZBA is going to give them anyway, regardless if there's a hardship. So why bother? If they're gonna give them a variance every single time, then change the regulation, and that's the proper way to do it. If you're noticing the same variance over and over again, you have to take a look, what have we done wrong? Or what changed? And you can either rezone, if there's the opportunity, like we looked at a subdivision today, that all the lots are tiny,
20 feet off the road for the house.
but they're tiny lots, but it's zoned R60. Bigger setbacks, but I mean, by the time you drew the setbacks on, I mean, they could have a 3 foot by.
The house is on the property next door.
Yeah,
We'd have Eric's 10 by 10 by 100.
Right.
Requires
Like we can't have
150 feet at the build line, and the lot's 100 feet wide.
Right.
well, that too, but then you had, 30 feet in here, 35 here, now what, you've got this tiny strip, and so, you could put in a double wide, maybe.
60 feet off.
No, you can't, you could put in a single wide, 22
Single
feet,
wide, yeah.
but is that what you want?
No.
No, you would rather somebody be able to put a nice house there. Right, so those
And
dimensional
that,
requirements
and
don't
that
make
was
sense.
without trying to figure out how to put a well in with a 75-foot radius
So-
and a septic system. Now, 75-foot radius is half an acre. On lots that are a quarter acre. How do I do that?
And so I had a lot of trouble with that section, that in your current regs, that's when you did all of the requirements by district that conflicted with all of your other sections. So the new section 4 just cleans that up, general requirements. And that's where I put in the minimum, the buildable area, that discussion. So then chapter 5 becomes all things residential.
Yeah.
Purpose, bulk, schedule of permitted uses and specially permitted uses and then any of your special districts. I took out your special districts except for, this is where I think I put conservation subdivisions and open space subdivision. You had like affordable housing, something incentive housing. There's no incentives. State's not paying you any incentives to do affordable housing anymore. They used to, that's gone. Your other affordable housing thing was stricter than 830G. You don't have 10%.
We
Somebody will pick 830G. They're not gonna do what you said.
We picked, when
There's
we
no way.
copied it from somebody, we copied East Line, which is probably a mistake after all the, yeah.
Yeah, because they hate affordable housing. But there's no reason to have that in there. No developer, given the cost of materials, they're not gonna pick that. They're gonna try to get as much density as they can. And there's nothing, you to do to stop that really. And then I did the same for chapter 6, just because of space constraints. I mean, you have a lot of commercial zones. I did break out the design districts and did their dimensional. And then your other districts and did their dimensional. And then I did do a chart of a use table for all of them. I could just fit it on the page. But same idea. And then your technology park, what's it called? Floating zone, the technology park, I stuck in that section. The other huge change that was made, like I was talking about before, was generalizing these uses, categorizing them together. So your categories are now residential, agricultural, commercial, institutional, which is civic, municipal too, industrial, miscellaneous, if I couldn't figure out what to stick it under, like parks and playground, or there were a couple weird ones in there that I didn't fall into a category, and accessory uses and structures. And then that commercial, you can break down further, because the one use that you are missing, that you allowed anyway, somehow,
It's the biggest use we have.
it's the biggest use you have, even though it's prohibited in your reg, is commercial services. A lot of things can fall under commercial services, just about anything can fall under commercial services. Obviously, watch out, because a lot of your nuisance uses fall under commercial services, so maybe commercial services is always a special permit. If you're nervous about that. I did call out some of those uses and gave like a motor vehicle repair as a commercial service, and I did say something about that area that you store all the junk cars and can't be visible, or it has to be fully screened. Things like that, so the next slide down, I sort of spelled it out for you. The generalization of these land use coupled with clear definitions and clear standards, that is gonna take you the farthest. That's gonna be the golden ticket to stop this. Oh, I think that's okay for this guy on this parcel, but not you over here. All of that, making it up as you go, you'll get rid of most of that, because somebody will be able to find a use to fit into. And then on the technical end, staff is being asked to make them tell you what use that falls under. Tell me out loud, go to the table, put your finger on it. What use are you applying for? So it's clear before you even get it. So I know what standards I'm applying to it, because that's what I'm gonna review the regulation on. So nobody's guessing. You gotta get the guesswork out of it. Developers don't like to guess, because they spend a lot of money on those plans, only to come in and have you say, well, no, I think you should stick it under here, or I think we could mix this use and call it that. No. Figure out what use it is, so everybody is being treated the same way too. That actually gives you that flexibility that you're looking for too. And since you can't waive anything,
Mhm.
you've got to be as clear as you can conceivably be. So I obviously added the supplemental regs are your next golden ticket there. And I think they come in. So you can go down, you can go to the next slide. Looks like thinking well, you guys can read that, but that's, you know, again, being deliberate, figure out what you want where, and if you don't want something, you don't like something, don't allow it, just be done with it, or make it a special permit. But when you, one thing is missing here, and I do have to work on it. There are some, you know, scary uses that don't have supplemental regs, so just, you'll have to look at the site development standards and say, is that enough? Is that gonna be enough to get me a good design if this scary use comes in? And if the answer is no, we can either write a regulation to deal with the scary issue, or do you feel that the special criteria on special permit are gonna be enough for you? So when we go through that exercise, you have to keep that in your head. I have these site development standards, these generals, and these dimensional requirements. Is that enough to protect me from all the uses I'm thinking could fall under this category? So the next chapter 7 and 8 are your general miscellaneous regs. So now you've done your general dimensional, all things residential, all things commercial, and now there's miscellaneous supplemental regs that cross, you know, commercial or residential driveways, or those sign regulations are both ways. You know, there's sign regulations for residential too. We could, Katie, put something in there, and lighting, you know, that crosses over. But it's small enough and clear enough to people that are staff, they know to go to this section for non-conforming uses. Driveways, your residential driveways are in here. And that's always a tricky one, because I never know where to put those, but you have driveways for houses in commercial zones, like, how do we deal with those? So driveways are a tricky one to figure out where they land. Interior lots are in here, act for protection, stuff like that. And then chapter 8, supplemental regs. So when you say, oh my God, these regulations are 40 pages longer than the last set, so what? You need them. These are your supplemental regs and site development standards that I had to add in, and that's where all the extra pages are coming from. So the supplemental regs only apply to the applications that require commission review. If it requires a site plan or special permit, or site plan, then these kick in, and they're lighting, landscaping, access management, refuse storage, outdoor storage. I did take that use out. There's another no-no. Outdoor storage and sales. Where's your tax revenue? Make them put a building. You don't want that. So you can allow outdoor storage if they have a building and they want to put something out there, but don't allow that as a use, because that automatically is a nuisance use. I promise. What could it possibly be? Manure storage? I mean, what could it be? So yeah, but even a contractor's yard, if they're a landscaper, they have their office there and their garage for the things, then they could store the stuff outside. But there's got to be something else there. And that's typically accessory. It shouldn't be the only use there. So I did take that out, but all right. And then some, and we've already gone over some of these. These are the ones that may not be as popular, where we might have to argue about a little bit, but ADUs by right, attached or detached, and it could be anywhere on the property within your envelope. And according to you know, health code and stuff like that, because if we agree that ADUs should be allowed as a way of providing infill or providing a place that's more affordable for your kid when they insist on staying home and not moving out, at least they don't have to be in your house, it can be in the backyard. Or after COVID, you want your relatives nearby, you want to do a short-term rental, whatever it is that's going to save you financially. You don't then want to make it impossible by saying, well, you got to put it in the backyard. And so now 90, or I don't know, 50% of the houses are off. you can't do it right off the bat because they put their houses too far back on their yard. Or, okay, I can squeeze it in the backyard, but my septic system's in the front, and I gotta run a line all the way around and connect. If you can squeeze it in the front, let it be there. You can't regulate ugly, right? So if one person who doesn't like these things because they don't think it looks good in the front yard, it's not your yard. You decide the envelope, and whatever that person wants to put in that envelope, per health code and building code and setback, that's their house, it's their yard.
Now, would that building would be considered an accessory use and it would be subject to the accessory setbacks?
No,
No.
just whatever it can't be by statute now either. Whatever the setbacks are for that zone apply. I mean, for the
Okay.
physical structure apply.
Same standards as for the primary residence.
Yep.
So as it should be. And then it would occur in a, I think I put the regulations in this packet, so you can see. Then I removed, so multifamily, I got it, this is the best math thing I found. Okay. First of all, you want multifamily in certain districts, and you've identified a zone that you wanted in, yay. You then wrote these regs that make it impossible for them to be there. So you've written in such a way that, because in chapter 4, I can't remember which is which, in one of the chapters you talk about bedrooms per acre with a 5-acre minimum. So we're already at a 5-acre minimum, even though there are no minimum lot sizes for some of your zones up here. So number of bedrooms per acre, and then in the other section under multifamily, it's dwelling units per building and dwelling units per 7,500 square feet. That's totally different. So you end up with a scenario, if it has to be 5 acres of, and you don't have sewers, let's say, you could end up with 20 bedrooms on 5 acres in a residential zone, but in your multifamily, you could have 29 units, but only 20 bedrooms. You could have 29 units, meaning apartments, but only 20 bedrooms. So what happens? So you get all 1 bedrooms and some that have no bedroom at all, which is against building code.
Yeah, well, we said that 0 bedrooms are allowed.
Well, you forced it, actually. So that, the math just simply doesn't work. And then it gets worse if you get up to, if you have sewers, you get 8 bedrooms per acre. Have to have 5 acres now. So that's, 40 bedrooms on that 5 acres, but you still only have 29 dwelling units.
Then they were in 3 different spots.
It's just, it doesn't work. Yeah.
And I could explain how we managed to do that, trying to accommodate some of the equipment side of the lot.
Right. So that was a matter of that section 4 contradicting your supplemental regs in section 8.
But that's also a good example of why I have 3 different spots trying to regulate the same thing. Really, what we're talking about. Middle housing, parking.
And then we were talking about what we call the gotcha regs. And so when I first got here, I could not maneuver these regs at all. I had to make myself a cheat sheet in order to be able to review our plan. And so I pulled out all the things standards I'd be looking for. And then did a word search to see where they showed up. So for parking, I don't know what the camera is. If I want to find out about parking, I have to go to all of those places to look for regs. Now, there's 25, definitely. If you were a resident or a developer, you wouldn't know to do that. You don't know that they are in the chapter that says parking. That's what they should be. So, and that's where, the person comes in, he hasn't talked to the planner, he's developed this plan, he thinks he's great. He didn't know to go to section 8, he was just in section 4. He spent this money now only to find out we can't do that. Or the subdivision design, that's a lot of time and effort. And when they talk to the person about how easy it is to develop in Ledger, the answer is going to be, oh my God, don't go there. And so just little changes like that are going to make a huge difference. I eliminated the no structure in the front yard and cleaned up that definition. The conflicting criteria with multifamily, the gotcha regs. There were a lot of other conflicting, standards. And then added specific mechanisms to achieve some of those safety and design goals. So I couldn't take your design guidelines because it's not a village district, but I put in like the design intent. Nobody has to follow it, but this is what we were envisioning. It's just a guide, but some developers, they want to do something that you want. They always tell me what you want. And so that's how we did. And then you talked about your POCD managed economic growth, like every town wants to be able to, control what comes out, what everything looks like. It's very hard to do, but, I get it. You're always trying to balance economic development with environmental, rural character stuff. So those changes to the agricultural regs, very deliberate, and it's sort of letting this incremental commercial use come into a non-commercial area, but in a controlled fashion. I gave you better excavation rigs to protect you, against what that typically ends up looking like. I added that commercial services, which will go a long way and allow your now all non-conforming businesses suddenly be conforming, which is great because then they can expand. I added mixed use regulations because before you were saying in like a random chapter, not in your use table, you don't have mixed use in your use table. You had commercial complex or something, but that doesn't work. You have to say what mixes of use are allowed. It's not at the discretion of the commission. You've got to pick the uses that are allowed. So I gave you two options for mixed use: residential, commercial, and commercial industrial. So you don't open up the 830G thing if you want mixed use in an industrial zone. Light and heavy industrial and warehouse I put in, and then we'll decide where that can go. And so food and beverage manufacturing, that can be just manufacturing, but just in case you wanted a little extra control there, I put it as a separate category. And somebody wants to do that here too, and I was realizing kind of I don't know how to fit you in. Changes to the driveway regulations, we need to definitely hammer this out. There's so many, it's 12 foot here, not paved, 15 foot if it's shared, or no, I don't know, 18 if it's more than 4. It's all over the place. We gotta pick one and make sure it makes sense that you can do snow stacking. So you have all these tiny flags of 20 feet. I don't know where that came from. That's way too small. Because if you have a 12-foot driveway, whatever is required, that's not really enough for utilities and snow stacking, or two-way traffic if they wanted to have, say, a home occupation back there, or, or they may want the ability of more than one car to pass. And Peter Gardner, we know, loves 10-foot driveways, so, and how small they are. They
Yeah, I
feel
got
small, right? So do I, and it's tiny, and you couldn't pass if there's a drop off on either side. There's no way you could. So give yourself a little bit more of a room there, because some of those just didn't make sense to me, and I'm still working my way through those. And then I went through it, and at any time I found something that looked like it was a standard, even though it wasn't in the area that you were talking about standards, I put into that one chapter. I added membership clubs. It's a reg I had in North Bennington. I don't know if you want it or not, but you do have a gun club somewhere, right?
Yep.
But membership clubs, you had clubs, but I didn't know if you were talking like dance club or, so you don't have to take that one. I just put it in there as an option. And then personal services, you seem like you were afraid of those because there was like tier 1, tier 2, and I saw somewhere. I don't know what you're afraid of, so I didn't put any supplemental regs because I don't know what the issue is.
From someplace in central Connecticut. We argued back and forth on it and just couldn't come up with something better, so that's what we adopted.
Because you can't regulate the density of the number of those, types of uses in the zone. Like liquor stores, that state decides that.
Yeah.
But personal, like you can't say, I only want one nail salon. If you allow personal services, you could end up with 30. And you have uniformity, you have to say yes, you know, I mean, if they need the
I,
right. So,
so I think a certain individual is against certain personal services.
Yeah, well, it all started with.
Massage
Right.
and massage and piercing.
Yeah, that's where it
And
started.
for people that come along with that, but
Oh,
everybody has tattoos and piercings
Tattoos.
now.
I was tweeting on their ankle, what do you mean, no tattoos?
I'm covered them.
Yeah.
Anyway, my daughter's covered in one, she's, I mean, I wouldn't care. if
I don't
we
do
were
needles,
Hanging
so I
out
don't
at
understand.
night.
I don't get them in the itself.
Yeah, I don't, no tattoos, so I
Um,
don't care.
all right, yeah, so we
That's
already
where it
went over
started.
that. So you can go down, I already went over that. I grouped all of your site development standards in one place.
Mhm.
And then the last chapters, 10 and 11, that now altogether, this is what's standardized. We're trying to get standardized, you know, through multiple towns. This just, you know, how many applications to turn in, what the timing is. This chapter is really more for staff, you know, if you want to double check what the process is. What happens after it's approved, how long you have to file it, you know, all of that kind of stuff is in there. I put boundary line, and I broke it down by that which staff does, that which, you know, site plan, special permit, map amendment, text amendment. And, you know, so that's all in one section there, and that should be standardized. Chapter 13 is to put paragraphs on enforcement. It broke out zoning board of appeals. I didn't change anything in either of those. And then I was being a little lazy, and I don't know where it is right now.
Page before.
Oh, yeah, chapter 12. I mean, I'll do it if I don't know, I might have to just write that.
I don't know, we always kind of,
Well, those.
They should go in general, in the
well,
miscellaneous.
because they're different hats.
Well,
When we first adopted all those, like the CAM regulations and the FEMA regulations, because one of the reasons why we kept them as a separate is because when the commission has to stand and look at that, they kind of have to take their zoning hat and put the CAM hat on. So that's why it was kind of kept deliberately
Well,
out of the
plus they
zoning
were
regulations.
pushed. FEMA, when FEMA updated, they pushed us a new set of regs.
Right.
We ledgerized them, sent them back. They said, okay.
Right.
And
it
they
was
take up a
just
lot of
easier.
room in the miscellaneous.
Right. So the reason why they're kept separate is mainly because it's a different hat that the commission has to wear when they're reviewing the based upon those.
And it
requirements.
was too hard to
So do you want me
separate.
to put them in, I was gonna put them in
They're
15
fine.
with aquifer protection, but that's an agency, that's like zoning board of appeals, aquifer.
Right, which again, when we
Right.
put the other hat on,
So if you're okay with leaving them alone, I'd rather.
I think
just
they should be left alone as separate
Especially
documents.
since the next time they'll get adjusted is when FEMA says, here's a new set of regs.
Right, and then you don't have to
State says,
renumber that
Where's the
whole.
new set of cameras? We take that out, put theirs in after we ledgerize it, which is
Right.
really just plugging the town's name.
Right. And then your check sheets, and I gave you an example of the site plan one, it's just cleaner.
Yeah.
You know, the way you have it now, I don't know if does it apply, does it not apply, it's, you know, I mean, I kind of like the way you try to do it, but since I'm the one that has to evaluate these plans, I'm begging, do it by the check sheet. Because it just makes staff's life so much easier.
Well, I know it helped me, you know, as much as I came in, figuring I know this stuff.
And for a zoning official, especially if we're gonna have another new one, you know, that's a tough job. And you wanna be able to say, hey, it's not me, my boss made this horrible sheet, you know, but you gotta follow it. And it's just a tool for them to say, this is how we're gonna do it.
And, you know, I think the developers actually, you know, as Julie said earlier, they want to know what's required.
Right,
Here's the sheet, do this.
and they wanna spend time and effort rewriting and doing all that,
They
because
come
every
in
time
all
you do that, it's
smiling.
money.
Get their Mylars, going, these are ready for signature. And you go, yeah, but you know, you don't have any of this stuff. on it.
Right.
That's expensive.
So I made the site plan check sheet, I made there's one for single family houses, and you can, whatever other ones you want me to put in there, we can put in there, but. Or any other diagrams you might want to put in there, I can either put them here separately or stick them in with the definitions, you have a couple in there. And that's it, so I mean, it's gonna look, I wanted to do this way without giving you the documents first, because it's gonna look
Right.
completely different, and,
This is a lot better because we wouldn't want to try to go through without understanding why you're doing it.
right, exactly, I
It's a
wanted
lot
to say
better.
why.
Is there, I just realized that we have check sheets and everything. Do we have a good set of standards now for what their drawing submittal should look like, including
What the what?
their drawing submittals should look like, or is that in the subdivision?
Well, oh, there will be a separate subdivision check sheet too, but,
But right now, we tell them your plan needs to be. Yes, I guess that's all subdivision regs.
well, no, I
The
mean,
site plan
A2
reviews.
standard,
Yeah, A2
T2,
standard.
it goes through, you know,
But, you
everything.
know, we want vector and digital,
Yeah,
we tell them what their submittal should be.
that's in that chapter 11 and 12.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then in the back, I gave you just, like, you can see that the residential uses, I didn't mess with, I didn't change them much, but there's, you know, differences between the commercial uses, and I've highlighted the new ones and what got taken out.
I
Yeah.
know it's getting late, and I know you have an exercise that you want to point out, but the big thrust in 2129, the change to the zoning enabling statute was in housing.
Yeah.
Housing being affordable, housing being by right, housing being diverse, housing being available. And I know you put a lot of work in trying to do that with duplexes, mid-level housing, apartments, trying to make all that work. And the subtle parts where the same set of standards, the same set of regulations can apply to apartments in a commercial zone and apartments in a residential zone, because the lot coverage is different.
Right,
Uh,
use your tools that you have
Yeah.
and think about it, and you will achieve what you're trying to achieve without having to do that, you know, 4 units per whatever. No, what can the septic system on that parcel support? Oh, 4 bedrooms, that's it? Okay, well, that's what you get. You know, you don't have to decide that. That's not your job. That's the health department's job. You say you can, because you're in a residential zone, the lot coverage can only be this,
20%.
and the height can only be this, so that you're not gonna get a, you know, 5-story apartment building there. You're gonna get a 2-story one or a 3-story, or you're gonna get a 4-foot, because that's what makes sense in that zone. And you can make those buffers bigger. I mean, you can say, okay, it's 5 acres, or you could say, all right, no, maybe 2 acres, but you know, your setbacks are bigger, or your lot coverage is
Well,
less.
today,
However you wanna do
if
it.
we stay with 5 acres and you're in a residential zone, you only get 20% coverage. So that's 1 out of the 5 acres can be covered. You take that same 5 acres and you put it in a design district. We now say you can have 80% coverage, so 4
4
acres can
acres,
be
right.
covered. You can, so you can get a lot denser in the areas where we wanted denser
Right.
development. And we really did that by accident.
Without having to say a building has to be 50
Yeah.
feet from the property line and all these buffers. I mean, I was doing that math too. I'm like, where is this building going? Now you've just taken the entire lot away, so.
Well, I'd like to have chickens.
Yeah, okay, look, and I just gotta show this as an example, because somebody came in and they wanted 6 chickens. And I was looking at this lot, I'm like, where are they gonna put these chickens? So, the yellow area is the front yard, that because this person chose to put her house offset, now lost use of a whopping portion of it, and I didn't color in below here, that's the setback area.
Right.
So there's another 50 feet down here that they don't get to use. That's a lot of land you just took away from that person. And then I was like, oh, and they've got well radiuses, because you say something, it can't be, the coop can't be 75 feet from any,
From the
yeah,
well.
from wells, 100 feet from the nearest abutting house, 40 feet off the property. And I'm like, oh my God. So I was thrilled to tell her, I'm like, there's one little spot you can put your chicken coop, you know, yay, we found one, you know, but that's ridiculous. You know, if they want to put the chicken coop in the front yard, put the chicken coop in the front yard. I mean, like I said, if this person doesn't like it, they can put up their arborvitae's on their side, or their fence on their side.
A lot of
It's not
people
their
wanted those portable chicken coops, because then they can wheel it around the yard and the chickens.
Yeah, it was a whole
chicks.
yard.
Right.
Well, fertilizer yard.
Yeah,
right?
fertilize the yard, yeah.
You don't want to be always saying no. You want to be able to get people to yes without compromising, you know, ethically, obviously. And I don't want to be put in the position, or you to be put in the position, or any of the commissions to be trying to fit somebody in somehow, that you may no longer be on the commission and somebody else similar comes in and now you don't let them do
Down the
it.
line, right?
And then you just, it should be black and white. It is black and white. If your regulations are good, this is a very easy process. And then your cranky planner will be much happier. So,
You've been to one ZBA meeting, as I recall.
and I hope I never have to go back.
And from that ZBA meeting, she walked out knowing our regulations were screwed up as far as existing parcels anywhere in town, because we've changed zoning, changed setbacks. Things were built in the 50s without zoning. And we had nothing to allow the guy to use his property that he had, because we changed the setbacks and now we needed to meet him, and it ended up behind his house. So he couldn't do anything.
Right.
One meeting.
Yeah.
I know the last time we wrote it, I mean, we looked at a couple of areas, like
Yeah.
Howden Heights and the Highlands, that said, well, those houses were all built with 50-foot setbacks back in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
That's when we rezoned those.
Well, we
R20
moved, and
zones.
even moving that setback line, I thought I was gonna get tarred and feathered.
Yeah, well, but we moved it and, then my old house, I was fine.
Yeah,
My
new house,
house.
not so much.
Sit on an angle. One corner is good, the other one not so much.
So now zoning is supposed to protect property values, right? So, and everybody's property values. So now if you have that guy that, you have the street here and this guy put it back there and this guy's up here and this guy's way too close up here. And if your regulations are so strict that this guy can never do any upgrades to his house, he can't put a porch, he can't do anything nice, or this guy can't do it because now suddenly his building line's way back here and this one's over here and this one, talk about not uniform. Now this guy's gonna let this house go because he can't do anything, and now you just ruined his property value. So zoning is also supposed to protect property value, and you have to make it so somebody can invest in their property reasonably. And so that exception, I said, if you're this guy, or wasn't that extreme, but if you're here and your setback line's way back here, this is existing house, it was built way before, then now your setback line is here. So your front yard setback is wherever your building is. That's what we would consider the building line, and everything has to be behind it. But this guy, now I'm giving him relief because now his building line is, way back here. They've taken all of this land from this poor guy. No, your setback is what it is for
But
everybody else.
the argument that some people can make is that, yeah, here was so here was the setback line.
Right,
This person chose to build their house back here.
right. And now they're punished.
They made the choice.
Well, but most houses in Ledyard have sold multiple times, so he made the choice to buy it.
Yeah.
I'm
And was that
not-
regulation in place?
and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying that whoever built this house made the decision. to
Did he
set it
know
back.
that you weren't allowed to put it in the front yard? Because I didn't
The-
find
the-
that in there at all.
But
Took
there's
about
nothing.
2 months before I saw it.
What, nothing in front of you, as long as I was on, from the start, when I was on zoning, starting in what, 2004, 2005?
But
It's never been allowed to have anything built in the front.
But somebody coming
63,
into
we
your
allowed
town and building a house,
In 60, early on they did, but I'm just saying in the last 20 years, we've never had.
but who would know that? When I bought my house in Voluntown, I didn't read all of Voluntown. Well,
Well,
I did, but I'm a planner.
Well,
But,
no, to
you
your
know,
point.
to know
nobody-
what-
When
what
somebody
I
buys
did.
a house anyway, the first thing they do is, before I buy the house, let me go read the town zoning regulations.
They don't even read them when they're trying to do
I
something.
think that for the most part, they don't have any idea. I mean, people that I think are,
And you're setting yourself up for a negative conversation and a negative
they're
feeling.
interested in land use, they're interested in their home,
You can
but
stop
they
sharing.
don't stop and look and see so they know their area is probably zone residential. Well, I've got nothing from the rock wall behind my house to hit Gunjiwam.
Right.
There's 100-acre farm, there's 100-acre horse thing. Cervello's got 150 acres, there's nothing back there, it's undeveloped. The Ledyard part of it is residential.
Right.
That's the same area that at one point people thought they were gonna build a prison.
Yeah.
And everybody said, well, zoning won't allow that. Well, that's a state project. Zoning doesn't have anything to say about it.
There was one other thing that you raised, or that I changed. You had it that interior lots had to show that they could put a driveway in. You didn't say anything about frontage lots, so everybody has to show that they can have their own driveway
Yeah.
before they're allowed to share it. But right now you allow with this.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, right now, somebody can, well, somebody did. You know, the shared, you can have four, it's a conservation subdivision, you can have four people sharing a driveway or something. But you didn't make them keep it, you know, in an area that made sense. So, you know, I'm saying, if you want to do this, you know, design it so you know, so there's a logical place for a right of way, right? So if this is 1 lot, 2 lot, 3 lot, whatever, that the shared driveway is attached to wherever that farthest house is, you know, this is where the main driveway has to stay in a 25-foot right of way that attaches to that lot. And then you get one, and if you don't do this, you know, so this guy has a house and has a driveway all the way through his front yard and has effectively can't use that. That everybody has to have their own driveway off of that one
main
right of
right-of-way.
way that gets to the top lot. And that'll stop that
And
crazy lot stuff.
I've asked Julie to look at, you know, why do we do stack lots outside of conservation or open space subdivisions? Do we stack too many? Do I have too many interior lots? Because I'll allow 2 interior lots behind the front lot. So I could have 2, 4. I could have 5 lots off of that one. There's 6 lots off that one driveway. I think we've done it sometime. I kind of behind count. Do we really want to continue to do that? Or are we losing out in the long run?
And you don't even follow a reg that way. You only say they can share it if there's a topographical problem.
Yeah.
You don't say anything else. I still don't understand how they get to do that, but it's gotta be clear, and neighbors eventually fight. They always do.
I could show you a couple of
So they should
examples.
always be able to have,
He was out of
forget it,
condition
I wanna
review.
put my own. We have an issue on Long Cove Road right now. That the person's refusing, a new owner is refusing to fix the drainage issue and move forward. It's too hard. So if you have a good reason for a shared driveway, like, or I'm gonna protect all these wetlands, great. But then make sure it logically gets to the house without crossing over 6 parcels to get there. I mean, don't feel like you have to say yes to that developer. Say no, that's not a good design. Could you please reconsider that? Bill Sweeney's here. Do you want to contradict anything that I said? Because you're the genius, so.
No, I certainly don't want to contradict anything Juliet says. You're lucky to have her. I do have a question though, if the chairman and the commission don't mind, if that's okay.
Please.
So I'm really excited and to hear that you guys are considering making the changes, and I do have to say, you know, Juliet said something earlier that the changes she made in North Stonington really jump-started development in that town, and that's absolutely correct. You know, even before the changes, Juliet, you know, was actually encouraged a number of my clients to invest in that town, but it really has changed the game in that town, and I hope you guys can make similar changes. I want to talk specifically though, and I have a question and just maybe a couple comments about multifamily, because I think it's so important to what you guys do. You know, as you all know, you know, EB is expanding, and there's a desperate need for housing. And I've been involved in most of the large apartment projects in this part of the state over the last 5 years. And you've got a situation where Groton, quite frankly, is dysfunctional. And Stonington is anti-development, and there is a need for literally thousands of housing units for transient people, not families where there's kids going to the school system, but people with high incomes, disposable income. And you guys are really well poised with your location to grab those people and have them live in Ledyard if you have housing for them. And so, you know, this idea that Juliet's put forward to basically allow multifamily throughout the town based on septic capacity, on the actual carrying capacity of the land, and not some arbitrary bulk, or density requirement, I think is really a great idea. And it's probably the best thing I heard tonight. So I encourage you to really consider that. I just wanted to confirm though, is I understand it. Would multifamily be allowed in all of your residential zones as long as it met the bulk and dimensional requirements? And would it be allowed in all of your commercial and sort of your special districts now, like the Gales Ferry design? And I think you have another one too, the Ledger Center design district. Would multifamily be allowed in all of those zones, provided it meets the capacity requirements?
I put it in all of the zones, and we'll have them play around in the residential zones with that lot coverage.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, multifamily district obviously is where we want it, but yeah, it would be allowed there because it's sort of already allowed with mixed use, the mixed use reg. And
Right.
since the statute also says you can't dictate how many units or a maximum, you can't determine the maximum units or something.
Can't cap it, yeah.
You can't cap it, it can fit in that way, but I believe that multifamily is a commercial use.
And so I would encourage you to allow multifamily to as many places as possible. And, certainly because you guys are going to be limited by septic, in many places in town, you're not going to have large apartment complexes just because you can't sewage them properly. But where you do have the sewage, you can do some more dense multifamily. And I certainly would encourage you not to put arbitrary restrictions on density. I think that is something that developers struggle with. And it's certainly something that I would encourage you not to go down that road. The only other comment I have is about mixed use. And I know that under the current regulations in some of your districts, multifamily is allowed, but as long as it's part of mixed use. I think there's I work in a lot of different towns, and there is, throughout the state, all the way out to, Danbury, to Stonington, there's this sort of idea that everybody wants to be Mystic, or everybody wants to be, Blueback Square, where you've got, cute little, shops, and then you have apartments over them. That doesn't work in most places. And I just want to, and this is sort of the economic realities. I mean, look at places like New London and Norwich and the struggles that they have, where they have the infrastructure already in place and they can't get that to work. It's really an issue of critical mass. And I'm taking nothing away from Ledger, because I think Ledger's a great town, but Ledger cannot support that. Certainly can't support it now, nor will it be able to support it anytime in the near future. So if you want to encourage mixed use, I certainly would allow it in your regulations, but don't mandate it. And if you feel like you have to mandate mixed use on a parcel, don't necessarily buy into the idea of the commercial on the bottom floor and the apartments above, because you just won't get any development. It won't happen. A lot of towns now are starting to realize that you can do developments if you are absolutely insistent that you have a commercial aspect. Put the commercial aspect out toward the road and put the apartments behind. So you can have a mixed use project, but it's not all in the same building. And I think that's just sort of the economic reality of it. I think you might be successful if you really want to push a mixed use concept. You might be successful in attracting that. But most of the developers I work with are standalone residential developers. They don't want to do commercial, and the commercial guys don't want to do residential. And it's a very small sector of the developers who are willing to do that sort of over-under design. And I just don't think that that's realistic. Certainly allow it if people want to try it, but I don't think you're going to see it. And so don't handcuff yourself in that way. But I'm really excited about it. And Juliet's been a really positive force. Many of you know I was a planner for a long time before I was a lawyer. And in sort of simple terms, I put planners in two buckets. You have pro-development planners and you have anti-development planners. And Juliet's definitely on the pro-development side. And you guys are really lucky to have her. I know Liz was too, quite frankly. She was a pro-development planner too. Ledger has a good history of that. And so I'm looking forward to working with you guys in the coming months. And I certainly have some projects in the works. And people are looking at Ledger, and they are watching what you guys are doing. So I'm really excited, and keep up the good work. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit.
And I
Thanks,
did, I have not put it in, we aren't allowing multifamily in the industrial district, obviously, because we don't allow other residential or CIP. the commercial marine, there's no parcel big enough, and neighborhood commercial, there's no parcel big enough, so it's just.
Well, and if it's near the water, the DEP is not gonna want you to do it anyways. They're anti-development, so.
So it's in the other ones, and we should get together and talk about that mixed use, because I struggled with that regulation.
Sure.
How to write it the way you just said it, because to me, like, can you have mixed use? As long as you allow it in two separate buildings.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, sometimes that's what makes it economically viable, because you got to bring in, a lot of times residential developers will partner with a commercial developer. They're completely two separate entities that are working on the same parcel. And so you've got one group that's developing, the restaurant or the shopping, plaza, and then behind you have a residential developer. They're completely separate buildings. They're on the same parcel. They're developing it together as a mixed use project. That works. Rebuilding Mystic doesn't work. And some towns have tried to do that and realized how difficult. I mean, I write a lot of regulations too. I was responsible a lot for the down in Waterford across the bay from Niantic. Mago Point is undergoing some renovations right now, but they have sort of that mixed use thing, and it's been real slow because the only people that want to develop down there are multimillionaires who are doing vanity projects. That's the reality, because nobody else, it's not economically viable to do it otherwise.
We're not walkable. We don't have, the historic downtown that already has the draw. And we
Right.
certainly don't have the, the net, the mass, the amount of people we need to draw that.
But if you get quality and luxury multifamily with people with disposable income, you will get the commercial you want, and you'll get those walkable communities, because there'll be people there with money. And when that happens, developers see that and they want to capture that money. Right now you don't have that critical mass. So if you build it, the people will live there, and then the businesses will come. And that's really got to be how you do it. And I would focus, quite frankly, on, Ledyard's a beautiful town. You have great open spaces. You got the river. Capitalize on the scenic beauty of the town, but make it attractive for developers to come in. And everything Juliet said about making it the ease for a developer is so important. It's also the predictability too. So there's a reason why developers stay away from certain towns where you never know what the commission's going to do. The developer knows that they can go in and invest often tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars just on plans. And then if they have no idea going into the hearing that they're going to get their approval, that's not a good place to do business. But if there's a track record of, hey, if you follow all the rules, if you work with staff, if you work with the commission, it's a pretty good chance you're going to get your permit at the end of the day. That's the kind of environment you want to create, because that's where people will invest and then reinvest again and again and again.
And they Ledyard doesn't have to worry about some radical change to the character of town, because there's so few commercial parcels that are able to be developed, and you've identified them and you have ideas of what you want there. So I don't think you're not going to run any risk of changing how the town is. It's like North Stonington didn't radically change, and look how much development it's had. So
In our current regs, we do allow mixed use in separate buildings in the Ledyard Center.
I kept it in here,
District,
so
and
we
it's
do
still
already
in
allow
there.
that.
But we had realized that trying to put it all in one building may have been difficult. And it may have been you that told us that back 5 years ago. I don't know, but
I think, Mike, you and I had that conversation 5 years ago. I said that, like, hey, that's a great idea. I love those communities too, but Ledyard's not Portsmouth. It's not, and it's not going to be Portsmouth. It's going to be its own thing. And you don't want to be Mystic, because you know what? There's a lot of people trying to be Mystic. It never works. Be your own place.
We tried that with the Ledyard district, the village regulations to do just that.
Yeah.
And as soon as we imposed those regulations, all development stopped.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we had that in there for 15 years and no development happened.
That's good.
Yeah.
Besides that, I tried to go out to dinner in Mystic last weekend. Couldn't find a place to park, couldn't find a restaurant that we could walk into. I don't want to be Mystic.
They won't let me build any parking down there. So anytime I build parking, I get Dave Collins writing an article about what a horrible.
You're tearing down historic buildings.
That's me. I'm the guy.
I'll send you the reg I have now, Bill, so you can tell me that legal works too. That's a tricky one, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to give some thoughts on it. Obviously it's your choice at the end of the day, but again, I really thank you for giving me a chance just to talk and really look forward to working with you guys. And, Ledger's always been a really great place to do business, and you got a great planner, and I know you got a new chairman, and you got it's an exciting time. So, and you're really poised. Like I said, don't underestimate the power of this EB expansion. If the other towns can't get their act together, if Ledger can, they can steal the development away from these other towns.
Thank you.
That was one of the points that, to Bill's point, which I think is a great point, is we had talked about probably going back to 1972, one of the first grand plans of Ledyard, and then there was another iteration in late 70s and again in the 80s and continuous, but they all talked about one common thread, which is 2 commercial nodes, one in Gales Ferry and one in Ledyard Center. And I think we need to look at, when Bill mentions critical mass, we need to look at what do we do to get the critical mass to those 2 nodes, because when we do that, it makes those businesses that exist more viable, and it also opens the door for new opportunities in that area. So hopefully both Gales Ferry and Ledyard, we can look at that and see what we can do to bring people there.
No, Mayor, but the town owns some land in and around the senior center, really. And we don't have enough dedicated senior housing, and we may want to look at what the town can do where we can get some money to kickstart some of that area that would bring in more critical mass.
Yeah, right. To continue having a nice cross section of housing opportunities, because what we don't want is people like Mike Cherry's and Tony Capone's of Ledyard to say, you know what, I don't need this house anymore, but there isn't a smaller version for me to live in. So therefore, I leave the town that I loved and lived in for a very long time. And right now, that's a problem that we have.
Right on.
Yeah, especially when people will pay top dollar for that 1980s version 4-bedroom colonial.
Hey, Fred, how many of those grand plans had a mayor named Allen?
0. So I have a stack of them in my office going back to, honestly, I think the first one was 1972. And, the iterations continued, year after year. I have all of them in a stack because I went through them at an EDC meeting and basically said, we've had this vision. Unfortunately, we've had the vision for 50 years, and that's really long term. And we haven't still gotten there. So I think this is, when Juliet and I spoke about the zoning regulations, and I absolutely embrace what she's doing. I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to actually get some of those things accomplished that have been just visions for 50 years.
Well, we scratched at it. I mean, we took half the parking lot at Riverside Mall, Ocean State Job Lot, and had them put grass in, trying to move towards our Mullen plan vision for Route 12 with the 3 or 4 commercial pads on 12, because the parking lot absolutely would support it. So we got that far and then it stalled. So, more to come.
Right. And that sewer line plan for Ledyard Center I think will very much be the conduit for Ledyard Center. We just have to be able to continue to grow that opportunity zone in Gales Ferry as well.
Great. All
Well,
right, thank you, everybody. Anybody else have any comments? Appreciate the presentation.
and I'm just cleaning up some of the formatting of the full document. I'm a little OCD that way, so I don't want anybody to see it when it looks bad. So I'm almost done with that, and then I'll send that out. And then but before we do that, I want to have 2 other workshops, hash out the uses, hash out the dimensional. And then we should be good to go for, sending the document out there so I can be put in front of the firing squad of the public.
Well, we have a forum presentation on March 24th for the affordable housing plan. And John's coming in for that. I don't know how long that'll take, but there may be time after that presentation for a workshop or
We
schedule
can
it.
just do it some other time
You
too.
know,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can move your meeting to start at 6:30.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Yeah, we
Or
don't,
we can
and
have
we don't,
something
if
ahead
we
of
don't
it.
have anything on an agenda,
Right.
then we're gonna hash it
Yeah.
out too, so.
Right.
With time, but.
If we can see what's on the agenda. or
Yeah,
we can
the,
move it up.
the planner is here,
Mhm.
so it's a matter of, can you get the commission together?
Yeah, and we can do it, I can, talk to two of you at a time and not
Yeah.
violate any
Yeah, we
rules,
can-
so.
Right, we can do it that way too.
But it should be a discussion where you're thinking about
Mhm.
all those principles that I was talking about and all your tools.
Mhm.
And then based on that, what else do you need in there? Without micromanaging ugly and,
Yeah.
and things like that.
All right, if there's no further business, we are adjourned at whatever time it is.
7:38.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Juliet because again, really all of these changes are really going to make it a lot easier for people to use their property and develop new property in Ledyard in a way that's really smart. Long-term, it's not just going to be single family houses filling up our fields. And I think that this is like a major leap into the future. So thank you.
We're all very- Thank you, everybody, for their patience and coming out tonight.
All right.
We're gonna see Fred and Kevin on Tuesday.
You got it. See you then, 4:30.
Later.
Take care.